Hello, my friends. Good Thursday afternoon to you. This is Bill Allen coming to you from downtown Tyler, Texas. It is on Thursday, and that means at 3 p.m. We do our Facebook Bible studies. And today, if you're watching live, it's a pretty day in Tyler, Texas. And I hope that you are having a good day as well. This Sunday is Easter Sunday, and so a lot of folks around the world centering their minds and their thoughts and their hearts on the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I, for one, think that's a great thing. I hope it leads them to turning towards Jesus throughout their year. But we'll take the good influence right now and hope and pray that there's enough of that good influence to continue to carry them on. Here in North Texas, we celebrate the death, burial, and resurrection all the time, probably just the same as you do. But also, Easter weekend is known around these parts for Leadership Training for Christ. That's LTC. And that is a wonderful convention in different hotels. Ours is the Anatole in Dallas, and we have 3rd through 12th graders that are participating in all kinds of different events, such as Bible reading, song leading, drama, puppets, chorus, just everything that you can think of. And shout out to all of those that are participating, our young people, all of the parents and the mentors and the coaches that have been through so much over the last few months getting ready for this, and all the hours and hours and hours they have spent. And I applaud you. Usually I'm involved in that, but not this year. But I can tell you that doctor's visit yesterday said that the prostate cancer is seemingly removed, and having removed the prostate in February and now spent the last couple of months recovering from surgery, it looks like all of the tests that are showing that that was localized and now it is gone are proving to be true. Doctor says I can't say I'm cancer-free for 5 years, and I'm okay with that, but as long as that PSA test is undetectable, as it was on earlier this week, and as long as all of that continues, that'll be great for us, and we praise God and appreciate all of your prayers and good thoughts and words as well. This year we're looking through the book of 1 Peter, Resident Immigrants, and in chapter 3, this past Tuesday, we looked at those words that the Apostle Peter had for Christian wives and Christian husbands that were there where he was writing to, probably the area of central or north central modern day Turkey. And the Christians there felt out of place in a secular world, and some of them were transplanted from other areas. But even those that weren't were seeing that their Christian faith and practice was a lot different than what their own land was used to seeing from them. And so one of the things where that shows up is in the home. And Peter, and I won't go into this, but you can listen to the lesson from Tuesday or just go back and read 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7. But Peter told wives to be submissive and respectful, and told husbands in the same way to live considerately and respectfully and lovingly with the wives, with your wife. And that is a great witness. And he used Sarah as an example. And you think, well, Sarah who? Well, Mrs. Abraham. Actually, Abraham and Sarah lived apparently around 2000 BC, so it was 2,000 years before them that Peter is writing to, and 4,000 years before us today in 2025. And certainly a whole different culture, and there's a lot of that stuff that doesn't translate. I get that, and we'll hear some of that today. But one of the things about Abraham is he is called the father of the faithful. And I've often wondered, well, what about Mrs. Abraham? In this case, Sarah. How about Sarah? Well, I'm glad you asked. So I wanted us to do a little bit deeper dive into the life and faith of the mother of the faithful. And yes, I believe she is called that in the book of Isaiah, and I'll give you that notation here in just a little bit. But let's begin at the beginning with Abram and Sarai, as their names were at first, later changed. But while they are away, long away from what would become the land of Canaan or the promised land, the land of Israel, God said this in Genesis chapter 12, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went, as the Lord had told him, Genesis 12, verse 4, and Lot, his nephew, went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. Verse 5, he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. The land of the town of Haran, or that area, probably far southeastern modern-day Turkey, and then going southeast, probably about 500 miles to what we would call the land of Israel today, the land of Canaan. And as they go, it's interesting that Abraham would tell his wife, "Honey, pack up. We're leaving." "Well, where are we going?" she asks. "Well, I don't know, actually. God told me that we're supposed to go." "And how did God do that, Bill?" "Well, I don't know. He heard a voice. There was something that Abram knew, that this was the voice of God. And so he was willing to be obedient. He told Sarah. Sarah said, I'm with you. I don't get it. I don't like traveling without a map, especially when we don't even know the destination. But I'm going. We're gone." And it was a great act of faith. And so what I want us to do this afternoon is just go through several of the stories that include Sarah, so that you can get a glimpse of this mother of the faithful. It wasn't just Abraham that showed great faith. It was also his wife, Sarah. And we see that beginning, and she had to be humbled so much during these years. Abraham is 75 when he leaves Haran and begins this journey. Sarah, 10 years younger, at 65. And they will live quite a long time later. Sarah, another 60 years or so. Abraham, the same. And it's going to be interesting as we see how all of this plays out. As they're traveling, they go to Egypt. And in Egypt, Abraham gets to thinking, Sarah, you're beautiful, and Pharaoh's going to want you. And I don't think that's a good idea. And he says, "Don't tell them that you're my wife. Tell them you're my sister." Now, was that right? Well, it was half right. It was half right. They were half brother and sister. But the significant information that they chose to keep from Pharaoh is that Abraham was married to Sarah. And again, this was a long time ago. This was not something that would be acceptable today. But it was acceptable then, and they were devoted to each other. And so Pharaoh, he realizes it, and then he says, God comes to him and tells him this is not right, and so God intervenes for Abraham and Sarah. And then in Genesis 13, remember their nephew Lot is with them. And as they travel along, they become wealthier and wealthier and have more and more animals and sheep and all of that to take care of. And they realize they can't stay all together anymore. And so Abram tells Lot, look out over the land. You choose wherever you want to go. If you go east, I'll go west. You go north, I'll go south. And so he gives Lot the choice. And I can just hear Sarah saying, you gave Lot what? You're the older one. Why didn't you play that I'm your ancestor, I'm your father figure. I get first dubs. Why didn't you do that? Because the land that Lot chose was the most beautiful land at the time. And it just happened to be the city of Sodom. And we'll hear more about that in just a little bit. Well, in Genesis 14, there's war in the land where Lot has chosen to live. And Lot and his family and his property are all taken captive by those who were at war against their allies. Abraham hears about it, and he gathers up his people and their supplies and their weapons, and they go and they battle for Lot and his family, and they are successful. God gives him the victory. And remember, Sarah is waiting at home. She's lost her nephew. She's lost now her husband, not knowing whether he will ever come back or not. And many of you know what that's like. But Abraham is successful, and he does return to Sarah. And it's interesting there in Genesis 14, on the way back, he runs into this priest of Salem, the ancestry town of Jerusalem. And that priest is actually named Melchizedek. You can hear more about Mel, as Dr. John Willis from ACU likes to call him. If you can hear more about Mel, you can read the book of Hebrews. In chapter 15, Abraham has heard the promise from God that we read in chapter 12. I'm going to make you into a great nation. You're going to have more descendants than you could ever count. All the nations of the earth are going to be blessed through you and through your descendant. And yet Abraham hasn't had any children. Abraham and Sarah have not been able to have children. And so he comes to God in chapter 15. He says, maybe Eliezer, my chief servant, maybe he's the one through whom I will be able to count my descendants. And God says, no, I'm making my covenant with you. And you're going to have to trust me on this. And Genesis 15 verse 6 is one of those powerful, powerful verses. It says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. And of course, it doesn't say much about Sarah. That's pretty typical. But we do know that Sarah was right there with him. And so I'm kind of thinking that Abraham and Sarah both believed God and continued this journey, waiting for that promise to be fulfilled. And it was credited to them as righteousness. Well, in Genesis chapter 16, they get a little antsy. And Sarah comes up with the idea, which was totally acceptable in the day, 2,000 years before Christ. And it sounds abhorrent to us today. But she goes to Abraham and she says, maybe you're supposed to have a descendant through my servant girl. Her name is Hagar. And so she gives Hagar to Abraham, and he sleeps with her, and sure enough, she has a son, and his name is Ishmael. And he is the oldest son of Abraham, but he's not the son of promise. God says, yes, I'll take care of Ishmael, and he'll have a lot of descendants, and it's the truth, but he is not the son of promise. That event will later be talked about by Paul at length in the book of Galatians. Well, in Genesis chapter 17 is where we read about the covenant of circumcision. That goes back all the way to Abraham. And in chapter 17, God makes this covenant with Abraham and says, from now on, the males in your household will be circumcised on the 8th day. Well, Abraham and Ishmael had not been circumcised, and so at 99 years of age, Abraham was circumcised, and at age 13, Ishmael was circumcised. Sarah, being 89 years old, still not having any biological children herself. And then later on in Genesis chapter 17, the names are changed from Abram to Abraham, from Sarai to Sarah. And this is what it says in Genesis 17, beginning at verse 15. God also said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of people will come from her. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? So they were 99 and 89 at this point. Abraham laughs to himself. Sarah is going to laugh as well. And Abraham said to God, if only Ishmael might live under your blessing. In other words, let Ishmael be the son of promise. This is too fantastic to think that Sarah and I will have a child now. Then God said in Genesis 17, verse 19, yes, Ishmael will be a blessing, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. And the name Isaac means laughter, or he laughs. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. When he had finished speaking with Abraham, God went up from him. We have a grandson by the name of Isaac, and I love him dearly, and I always think of him when I read this story or any story about Isaac. And he is that son of promise, born to Abraham and Sarah in their old age. Abraham being 100, Sarah being 90, and Isaac being born as the son of promise. In Genesis 18, Abraham and Sarah are visited by 3 visitors. There's some kind of angelic or heavenly characters. And they talk to Abraham, and they talk to him about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah that are going to be coming. And they talk to him about, again, renewing that plan that a year from now, Sarah will have a son. And Sarah, this time, is the one who laughs. And God calls her out on it. And then she says, no, I didn't laugh. But he says, yeah, you did. But all the same, it's still going to happen. Isaac will be born in a year from that time. In Genesis 19, Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. And again, we read about Abraham talking to God and having to do a little bit of negotiating with him so that he could try to save the city. If only 10 people, righteous people, could be found, God, would you save the city for that? And God says, sure, for 10 I will. But they couldn't find 10 righteous people. And ultimately, Lot and his family are stolen away because of the horrible immorality, homosexuality rampant in Sodom and Gomorrah at the time. The Bible speaks about that, condemns that, and it's just horrible. And ultimately, God deals that death sentence through fire and brimstone being thrown down from heaven upon Sodom and Gomorrah. But the angels take Lot and his wife and try to get them out of there and their daughters. And Lot's wife looks back at the city, just not sure that she wants to leave, it seems. And she's turned into a pillar of salt. And Lot escapes with his daughters. And we don't hear any interaction between Abraham and Sarah and Lot after that. In Genesis chapter 20, they go down to another area, and Abimelech is the leader. And once again, just as he did in Egypt, Abraham tells Sarah, look, let's not tell them that you're my wife. Tell them that you're my sister. And he takes her to be his wife, but he does not have any relations with her because, of course, it's very significant at this time because Isaac will soon be born. And so God spares him and saves Abraham and Sarah and Isaac from that. That's Genesis 20. And Genesis 21 is the story of the birth of Isaac. Genesis 21, now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him, which means Sarah was 90. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. Now make no mistake, the son Isaac was born in the natural way after Abraham and Sarah had relations, but it was still a miraculous, extraordinary event, much like Isaac and his wife, Rebekah, who would also be childless for a long, long time. God blessed them ultimately with a son as well. Jacob and Esau, twins, Rebekah had. Much like Hannah, who could not bear children until finally God answered her prayers and Samuel was born to her. Much like Elizabeth and Zechariah in the New Testament, the parents of John the Baptist had not had a child and even into their old age, but God came to them. The angel Gabriel comes to Zechariah as he is performing his priestly duties and says, your wife will have a son. Well, all of those were born in the natural way. The only one who was not, the only one who was born of a virgin, that was Jesus of Nazareth. But still, these are extraordinary, miraculous events. Sarah trusted in the Lord enough. And can you imagine that pregnancy, those 9 months? As Sarah at 90 years old, Abraham at 100 almost. What a glorious blessing Isaac was to his mother and his father. Just an amazing thing. Abraham was 100 again. Hagar and Ishmael, they ultimately are cast away from the home. Again, Galatians 4 speaks a lot about that. And the book of Hebrews mentions that as well. God takes care of Hagar and her son Ishmael, who is Abraham's oldest son, but is not the son of promise. A little caveat here: when Abraham dies, both of his sons, Ishmael and Isaac, in spite of the animosity they had towards each other, they bury their father together. And Genesis 22 is that very weird story that I'm sure broke Sarah's heart. When God says, take your son, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and offer him up to me as a sacrifice on an altar at a place where I'll show you. Genesis 22. And Abraham faithfully packs up, takes everything but the animal to be sacrificed. And Isaac asks him about that when they get there. And Abraham very faithfully says, God will provide. Well, imagine Sarah as Abraham is loading everything up. As he tells her, I've got to take Isaac. God has told me the most horrible, dreaded thing I could have ever heard. And I can just imagine Sarah, if Abraham told her, which I'm sure he did. Imagine Sarah and how heartbroken she must have been. But Abraham goes, and God faithfully provides a ram caught in a thicket, and they name that place, the Lord will provide. A great story of Abraham's faith and Sarah's faith. In Genesis chapter 23, we read about Sarah's death and her burial. And it's interesting, Sarah is the only woman in the Bible, check me out on this, but she is the only one in the Bible whose age is stated. There are several men whose ages are stated, including Abraham, but Sarah is the only woman. She dies at the age of 127. Abraham was 137, Isaac was 37. And at that time, they don't have any land. They're still traveling around, waiting for God to fulfill his promises. And so in the land of the Hittites, Abraham finds a cave, some land that has a cave in it that's suitable for a tomb. And so he goes to the owner and he says, I want to buy that land. And after a little bit of negotiating, he does. And he buries his beloved wife, Sarah, in that cave, the cave of Machpelah. And Abraham buries his beloved wife, Sarah, there. When Abraham dies, his sons, as I said, bury him there. Later on, Isaac and Rebekah, his wife, would be buried there. And their son Jacob, the son of promise, and his wife Leah would be buried there as well. Okay, so that's going on in Genesis 23. In Genesis 24, a few years later, Isaac is now 40 years old. God says, Abraham says, I need to get a wife for Isaac. And I can just imagine him saying this to himself, Sarah would roll over in her grave if I got you a son from the people of the land around here. I bet he says that exact thing. And so he gets his trusted servant. He makes him swear an oath, and he tells him to go back to their homeland, back up there in southeastern Turkey, modern-day Turkey, and find a wife for Isaac from among their relatives there. And sure enough, God provides this beautiful woman by the name of Rebekah. It's a wonderful love story when Isaac and Rebekah see each other for the first time. If you want to know if there's a book, chapter, and verse, a BCV for love at first sight, it's Isaac and Rebekah. It's a great and wonderful, beautiful story in Genesis chapter 24. And they're able to continue on, and Abraham is able to see the wife that is born, that is brought for his son Isaac, and he's able to see that promise is going to continue to be fulfilled. Finally, in Genesis chapter 25, Abraham passes away, 175 years old, 38 years after his beloved wife Sarah had died, and he instructs his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, to bury him by his wife Sarah in the cave of Machpelah that he had bought. And again, ultimately, Isaac and his wife Rebekah would also be buried there. Jacob and his wife Leah would be buried there as well. We do believe we know where that cave exists, and it's just about 20 miles or so south of Jerusalem, and it's a sacred place for Muslims and for Christians and for Jews. One of the most sacred places in the world. Well, that tells us a lot about Sarah. So let's just make some applications or kind of summary and read a scripture in just a moment from the book of Hebrews, from the faith chapter 11. When we get to heaven, I don't want to just talk to Abraham. I want to talk with Sarah. I want to ask her about some times in her life. Like that time when her husband came home and said, honey, start packing. We're moving. And Sarah says, moving where? And he says, well, I don't know, but God said we're moving, so you better pack everything. I want to know what she felt then. I want to know what she felt when she was the one, when she thought she was the one holding God back from fulfilling his promise to her husband Abraham, and felt so strongly about it that she was willing to give him her servant girl to sleep with and to bear a son. What a humiliating act that must have been. I can't imagine anything more humiliating. And yet, because she wondered if she was the problem, she was willing to go to even that extreme measure. Or when she found it so incredible that her husband would desire her at age 100, or that she would be bearing a child at the age of 90. So preposterous that she laughed with disbelief and named the child Laughter because of it. I'd like to hear some more stories about that time. Or when Abraham took Isaac to sacrifice him. I want to know if she knew about it and how she dealt with it. How angry she must have been, how hurt she must have been. I want to know about how very likely it is that perhaps they had that difficult conversation so many of us have had with loved ones when they face death. And she looked into the eyes of her husband for the last time and she said, I know we don't have solid roots here in this land. I know God has given us that promise and has chosen not to fulfill it. And now I'm about to die. And I can just imagine Sarah and Abraham having that talk. And Sarah saying, you bury me. You bury me in a legitimate tomb. And you save room for yourself. Because I don't want us to be separated after death. I can just imagine that was one of the conversations that they had that led to Abraham buying that cave of Machpelah. And one day he would join her there. Sarah is called the mother of the faithful, as we read earlier in Genesis, but also in Isaiah. In Isaiah chapter 51, look to Abraham your father, God tells his people, and to Sarah who gave you birth. God saw Abraham and Sarah as the patriarch and matriarch of his people Israel. Look to Abraham your father and to Sarah who gave you birth. Before we close, I want to just read a few verses from the book of Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 11, beginning at verse 8. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. And Sarah was right there with him the whole time. Verse 10, for he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. Hebrews 11, verse 11, and by faith even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who had made the promise. Abraham and Sarah, I believe, both considered God faithful and trusted him to fulfill his word and to deliver on that promise. And then verse 12, and so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sand on the seashore. From Abraham and Sarah, and both well into the end of their lives, came Isaac, and then Jacob, and then the 12 sons and a daughter, and then the nation of Israel, and the descendants of Abraham, including us, who are descended from Abraham and Sarah by faith. How is it that Sarah was able to do this? I think these words in chapter 11 of Hebrews, beginning in verse 13, describe her, as well as Abraham and the rest of the patriarchs. All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were looking for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And just as surely as that applies to Abraham and to Sarah, the father of the faithful and the mother of the faithful, it applied to those to whom Peter was writing in the book of 1 Peter, recognizing that they too were foreigners and strangers on earth, resident immigrants. That they too were looking for a country of their own that's not in this land, not in this place, not in this time. But they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. And I want you to know, my friend, today, God is not ashamed to be called your God. If you have responded in faith through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, that so many will be celebrating this weekend, and especially this Lord's Day on Sunday. And I do hope you're one of them, gathering with the faithful in church somewhere, worshiping the Lord, honoring his word, remembering his death, burial, and resurrection. Love to see you do that every Sunday. But let's start this coming Sunday. Remember, my friend, you too are also one that the Lord is not ashamed to be called your God. If you are also, like Sarah, the mother of the faithful, looking for a better country, a heavenly one, and through Jesus Christ, I know you will find it. I pray that you have a wonderful Easter weekend, and I will see you soon. God bless.